Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Open Internet Pod. As always, I'm joined by Richard Paris, co founder of Saito. And today, the topic will be digital ownership and the open internet. Now, we've spoken about this in various ways at various points, but we never really had an episode specifically about it. And I think that there are more and more things happening in the outside world where business models are failing because they're no longer able to grow the pie. So they need to double down on value extraction, and they're focusing more on the clients that they know they have for sure, and they're trying to extract even more money from those, while at the same time trying to cut all the bridges so nobody can leave, right? And I think that's a kind of like speaks to the whole idea of the open internet and digital ownership, because it was built exactly for these type of situations where you need to get out and you have to have somewhere to get out to, right? All right. So let's start with the news. I think this is very interesting. We'll start with the EU watch because that's the tradition of the show. But I thought it was very interesting. The thing that hit me the most, I don't know if, right, people are watching us from all over the world, but it's very interesting to see this idea of manufacturing consent, right? There's one of the easiest ways to manufacture consent is through polling. And you can always kind of game a poll to make sure that it says what you want it to say. And it brings me back to this idea that when you were reading about communist countries or totalitarian states, it's like 99% of the people voted for
the dear leader.
Only one candidate that we have to become president again, right? It was more a confirmation of what you are doing. And the latest stats from the EU Digital Decade 2026 Eurobarometer says that 92% of Europeans want more safety for their children on the internet. And it's just like, why bother with 92%? Just say 99.9%. You know, that's what you're trying to say anyway.
Well, it's also it's a false question, right? Like, yes, every parent, who are these 8% of parents who don't want more safety for their children? Of course you want more safety. You ask for the same thing about cars. Would you like cars to be safer for your children? Of course I would. Why would that be bad? Oh, well, because the car will weigh 8 tons and it'll only go 10 miles an hour and it will, destroy the planet, the amount of fuel it requires. Oh, okay, then maybe we need to strike a balance, right? The fact that if you just ask people boldly, would you like your children to be more safe online? It means that 8% of people out there think that the safety level is just fine, which tells you that it's not a safe place, but that doesn't, that's not the question, right? That, of course, everyone would like more of that. At what cost, in relation to what changes would they want to have to, take to do that? That's not been presented there. They've just shown that. And the way it's written up, I had to read through. It's written up as like, hence our mandate to do all the things that we want to do. Very much, you can see in the text of the thing that, oh, well, that proves, right? Obviously people are supporting what we're doing, which it doesn't at all. So yeah, very much kind of manufacturing that consent, like you say. It's a very interesting document because, it's a lot of motherhood statements, as they say, like, mum's good. Yes, of course they are. Right? So Europeans are strongly in favor of like Europeanizing tech. Well,
yeah, and it's also the fact that when you see like, 92% of European think that strengthening the protection of children and young people online should be a priority, there you go like, well, I guess I don't want to be in that 8% that doesn't say yes, right? There's so many people that agree with this. I don't want to stick out. We are social animals and we want to belong. And that's how you manufacture consent.
Causes you to question why am I not worried about this? Like, should I be?
we should also let everyone know that 92% of people think that Saito is the greatest project in Web3 right now. So
92% of people think the open internet podcast, there should be more of it.
Yes, I've read that. That was a very good, unbiased poll that was made.
Both of us voted very, very accurately.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's crazy, it's and it's all these like truisms, like 82% of European citizens think that the EU should reduce its dependencies on digital technologies from third countries. Like, okay, what are you going to do with that? But it's very interesting because, we're speaking of digital ownership and, we're going to get into it quite soon. But you have to see that these used to be like fringe things and now they're in the middle, right? And I'm thinking of this guy, Xbox owner loses decades of digital games after Microsoft deletes account.
Yeah.
And it's crazy I've read this article. Did you have a look at it?
Yeah. I was actually aware of it because it came up on another completely unrelated technical podcast I listened to about system administration. So yeah, like it's an amazing story.
25 years of data, thousands of euros spent on games. My son's baby pictures, all because Microsoft couldn't bring back a compromised account. And again, it goes back to the idea that when the leverage is on the third party, you have nothing, right? All you're about to get is an exit tax, like which happened to this guy. And this is why it's so important to understand what Saito is doing. Sorry, I'm talking my books, but it really is that sort of thing where Microsoft would not be able to do something like this on Saito Network because they would not have the capacity to do it.
No, if you have your ducks lined up, if you have your management of your own identity, then this simply can't happen in the first place because the compromised account was the reason this happened. And then their infrastructure went into some kind of overdrive and deleted it because it was compromised. That's just not a thing a third party can do to you if you have, personal control of your data. So yeah, I think it's just a classic case of like people having no idea. And there's so many more cases of related stuff I think we should kind of handle outside of the news, but this is just such a classic case of, I think, people not having realized when they signed up, like just how fragile things were and just how far from having any level of control that they were, right? So people buy something, you pay for something, you feel like, generally, there comes with some kind of terms of service that's going to cover my ass, really. I'm not going to get too badly screwed. And that's not true, right? That's just not true with digital content. And people, I think, are learning it really slowly.
Indeed. And it's one of those situations where like you get upset with this company, but at the same time, your own assumptions regarding that company were not really based in reality, right? Because you thought that whatever happens, you'll have an out. That safety and convenience that they kind of push on you, not explicitly, but they kind of like, underneath the surface, they want to make you feel like everything's going to be okay. Well, it turns out that, you can get screwed over, and no one has felt this more than all the gamers who happen to own a PlayStation or that are thinking of buying a PlayStation in the future, because Sony is about to end physical disc production starting in January 2028. And again, it comes back to this idea of what do you own? How do you keep ownership in a digital space? And I think that's going to be the topic for today. But how does the digital ownership tie into the idea of the open internet?
Well, I think it's part of the same, part of a whole, right? Digital ownership is, if you think about the internet as a kind of digital world, a digital place you live your digital life, then ownership is one of the rights and the things you do as part of your life. So a lot of the things that an open internet, a lot of the reasons that's important to you, well, that relates to, how you actually have control of your digital content. So the simplest way to get started on thinking about the relationship, I was thinking about this earlier, is it's about your identity, right? So if you own your identity, if you control your identity, then you have a chance of owning the things that belong to that identity. But if that identity is like rented or actually just vaguely granted to you by a third party, and that identity that's not yours, it belongs to them because it's behind the login system that they created on their machines, and behind their terms of service, that's the identity that owns the thing you bought, and that identity belongs to them. So you've got some tenuous right to access it, but it doesn't really belong to you. And that, I think, is the real key way to understand it, to get your mind kind of connecting it together. It's like, oh, okay, so the thing that owns whatever it is, my online music collection, isn't me. It's my Spotify account or it's my YouTube music account, and that's not really me. There's much more to it than that in terms of the openness, like can you use the things that you own, etc. But I think we'll get into that. But to start understanding that question, it's like, who are you in the actual power relations there? And if you're not the one that controls the identity, then that identity owning things is meaningless for you.
And it's one of those things where you kind of have to explain to people that there's a, how should I put it? There's a war or a battle taking place between these mega corporations on who gets to have the most people or bots or whatever you want. I mean, people, let's say people on their fiefdom, right? And whenever you go to a website, you see login with Google, login with Apple. That should, spark something in your mind and tell you that that's a corporation taking charge of your identity online.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason. Why does Google want to run the servers, the OAuth servers they happen to be, that do the work that manage that process? If they're, what are they getting out of it? Because they're not just going to offer it for free because they're nice people. So they're clearly wanting to expand their reach. The flip side of it is, when we talk about that guy losing his Microsoft account, he was presumably a good Microsoft user and put all his kids' photos in the Microsoft OneDrive. What we're missing is anything he set up to log in with Microsoft also went. Right? So he may or may not have, he'll just have to go and find out which way the wind blows in terms of going to other places, other services he used if he was using that account as his login. Right? Maybe they're well organized and they'll have a way for him to get back in. Maybe not. Maybe they're just like, well, you have no way of telling us who you are. That's been deleted. Yeah, sorry, but whatever you've got with us is gone now too.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these, I don't know, like very depressing negative loops where account creation fatigue kind of opened the gate for Facebook and for Meta and Google and Apple to create this service.
Yeah.
Right. Because people got tired of having to create so many accounts everywhere. Right. But you don't understand that if all your keys are on the keychain that Google or Apple controls, the moment your relationship with Google or Apple sours, the whole keychain disappears. Right. It's not like they take the keychain and they give you back all the keys. Like just the keychain was ours. No, they take the whole thing away. And I think that people have to look a bit in terms of like, what are the economics of this? For example, I was doing some research and I found out that every Google user in the United States of America makes Google around $480 every year. So they have a very good reason to keep you on their network, to keep all your information, because you're literally creating money. I mean, 10 people, that's $4,800. 100 people is $48,000, and 1,000 people is $500,000, and they have millions and millions of users. So you can imagine how much money we're talking about here. It's not a little sum, and all of that money is literally money that could have been yours, could have stayed in your wallet if you're using a network where there are caps in places where you only pay for the actual use, and you cannot be squeezed for pay $20 for a service that costs 20 cents.
Right. Well, and if you just had some kind of even footing when it came to deciding what happened with that data. So someone had to make you an offer, look, let us push our ads to you and we'll give you $1.50. But they actually had to make the offer rather than they can just do a backroom deal with Google and the terms of service change underneath your feed and suddenly you've got ads in your email and you didn't anticipate it, right? That's the big difference is are you even close to being at the table when those decisions are being made?
Right. If you're not at the table, you are on the table, as we all know. But it's true, and it's one of these things where it just like happened very, very slowly, and all of a sudden you get used to just clicking accept on any sort of terms of conditions because they're so long.
Well, I think
on purpose. They're very long on purpose, so you won't read them. What were you going to say?
I think it's quite subtle too, because I was thinking about this in the shower. And one of the things that happened is that stuff got dressed up. I mean, it's like skeuomorphic design, right? The save button is an old floppy disk that knows, Gen Z kid has a clue what it is, but just means that now, right? So that we're mimetic creatures. We understand these sort of pictures and so forth. So they use shopping trolleys and what's in your bag and that kind of subscription, right? They had these terminology for selling you, for asking for your money to rent out or to have tenuous access rights to something. But they use the I'm selling you something vocabulary and signs that you're used to from physical goods. So we immediately just imprinted the interaction with, this was like buying a pair of shoes or something in a shop, but it wasn't, right? And so people were very surprised. Of course, hidden in the terms of service, etc., is all the information about how it just very much isn't the same as buying that thing. But it kind of it wasn't just slipped in there. Those design decisions were there to make you comfortable, but they were also there to convince you that this was an everyday, ordinary purchase, just like your others, and you own the thing. You should feel happy that you've improved your life by bringing this thing into it. The whole commercial shtick, but it was masking the fact that this was no sale. This was the signing of a rental agreement.
Exactly, and it's one of those situations where you, even if you figure it out way down the line, right? And there's I remember how enraged people were when Google decided to read all your emails. And it's like, it's just randomized, it's just for, doing better ads and blah, blah, blah. But that came and went, and people just accepted it. And I think that the speed at which these things happen now have gone up so much, like the water is starting to boil so fast that the frog is noticing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like the first people to do this kind of thing were seeing what they could get away with, right? Or very cleverly in a meeting, we could change this or do that, and that would be slightly more profitable. We could change the way that works, right? Now people are looking at thousands of examples, watching the competition do these kinds of things, and so everybody's starting to do it. Like everyone in any corporate scenario now wants recurring revenue, so trying to turn anything they can into a subscription, cars, anything. And so the speed of increase is vast. I mean, it'll only stop increasing when there's no more ground to cover, right? When everything has had this process happen to it.
And I will have a hot take right now. You might disagree with what I'm about to say, but I think that even services like Proton and Tutanota are funded in a similar way, but they are meant to offer like some sort of like controlled opposition. But at the end of the day, it's still some VC-backed firm that they're giving you like, don't go on Google, do us because we are safe, we protect your all your data and so on. But at the end of the day, they still have to abide by the laws of Switzerland or wherever they're based, and they have given away personal data on many, many occasions. So this whole idea of trying to solve the problem but still keeping everybody in the old model, I think that kind of has to go, because until you're really Web3, where there is literally no way for people to take your stuff or to sell you in or stop you or enclose you, and that's like a ground level right that you have, that's when we can talk about digital rights, right? Because right now we don't have digital rights. We have, the illusion of rights, and we're constantly surveillance.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. I don't want to cast aspersions at guys like Tutanota and Proton, because I think they're fighting the good fight. But to your point,
they are fighting the good fight, but
yeah,
they have a lot of, how should I put it, economical incentives to do so. They're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart.
Right. Well, I don't know. People found companies because they want to do the right thing. I think there are two big issues. One for them. One is, as you pointed out, the regulations, etc., where they're based, trapping them on a lot of cases. And notably, someone like Mulvad did have, gave the police all of their records, which was zero, which was well done. They thought that through and they did a good job. So it's possible
That's
to fight a good fight. Yeah, exactly. But it's the other side of it is just that economic battle, right? Proton is not huge. And they struggle every day to beat out 1,000 other providers, including Gmail, which is awful, because in running things the way Proton do, if they keep fighting the good fight, if they keep things running the way they are, then they're only able to get a very small sliver of the market, because they can't outcompete on marketing and promotion, etc. Right? So they're always under economic pressure, and that's, I think, for the reasons you're saying, right? They're stuck in the old model in the end.
But that's what I mean. Like, they should be embracing something like Saito Network, because it would allow them to build something new without having all these constraints. But they still choose to do it the old way because, in my opinion, they're not trying to change something. They're trying to take over from someone, right? The business model is to not to defeat Google, is to replace Google, right? And if I can become the Google of my side of the world, then that's what I'm aiming for. I'm not aiming for giving people better services at a lower cost, or I'm just trying to manipulate the narrative so that I appear to be doing that, but in reality, I just want to take over.
Right. Well, all the same economic forces are there, and there's a real, pressure at every step that they're going to be pushed slightly the wrong way every time they lift their foot off the ground. I totally agree on that, and it's a constant problem. The difference that you're looking for is, could you do something like Proton Mail where the network stuff, the sending and receiving, is separate from the data holding, and is separate from the corporate side, right? So that they're all different services, right? And so there isn't a way in to be able to actually ever, for whatever reason, you may never have wanted to, but your corporate overlords might make you start monetizing the fact that people can't leave, right? If you've set your tech up the way that they have, that is always a risk to the users, right? And I would argue, and therefore spend my life building something that has an alternative set of models on it, that you have to break that model to break free. And so I think while I would rather be using Proton than other mail services, for a bunch of reasons, they are still stuck, like you say, in a model that eventually is likely to give way to a whole lot of economic pressures.
Exactly, and I think that I'm wondering, are we witnessing a split between the business model and consumer sentiment, right? Like the business model is continuing to be this we're better than Google, but you have to kind of pay us because we're fighting a good fight. But it's literally the same business model, right? And consumer sentiment that says, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to pay these prices that are like 100 times what it actually costs. I don't want to have to deal with all these login steps, like, two-factor authentication, all these crazy passwords. There is a simple way of doing this. You can do it with keys, and it's so much faster. It just requires you to have a bit of discipline so you don't lose your keys, right? And I think I'd much rather do that than have to have all these like authenticators on my phone and trying to remember all these passwords. Is just not fun.
Well, I think, being responsible for your own security does have its own challenges, but the payoff is massive, right? Because like you say, you then wipe away all of these things. You also have the ability to do things that you just can't in a password world, right? Like have your software create a pair of keys for you that will let you do stuff securely for a short period of time and then just delete them, right? Because you can create personalities on the fly, right? This is a powerful set of tools that you just don't have on the current internet, where essentially any space where you can do things anonymously is being shut down. You're almost always having to sign in or validate in some way. But then even if you can, the things that you can do anonymously, you can only look, right? It's a read-only web for you, right? So you can wander around anonymously looking at stuff, but you can't interact. You can't do anything. You can't have any agency if you're anonymous. Running your own security and identity software with things like keys, that can be managed by good software. You don't have to like spend your life doing cryptography or anything. But what it means is you've got the power to decide how those things happen. So you can create an anonymous account and interact, prove that you're the same person through that account. So you can buy and sell something as that identity securely while you're using it, and then just toss the identity when you don't need it anymore. That's radically different to anything we see on the internet at the moment.
All right, that's a very high concept idea that you just put forward. How would you translate that into a practical example? Like, let's say we're normal people. How would that look like for us? I'm a father of 3.
Yeah.
I have to take care of my family's Netflix accounts or stuff like that. How would this way of doing things affect me in a positive way?
There's a bunch of ways, right? So one is you want to buy your spouse a gift, right? Simple interaction, and you want to do it anonymously until the birthday that the gift is for, and you don't want ad tracking suddenly popping up. Someone in your household is looking for an anniversary ring. It's a simple human interaction, but you want your privacy there, right? And we just don't have the ability to control that on the current internet. So you're running this bizarre risk that you're going to get found out for doing something totally innocent that you, in fact, quite positive, that you just don't have any ability to act anonymously. Another example would be that you want to buy a ticket to see someone speak about something political, and you don't want that left in your record, right? That's getting more political, but you could do that, right? It could be a simple situation where I want to buy a ticket to that and I don't want a record of it going around. I don't want to, I live in a certain place and I want to buy, I don't know, pharmaceuticals that aren't legal. That might be abortion pills or something like that, right? There's a 1,000 different examples where you might want your privacy while you're doing things, but right now the internet is set up to expose you all over the place and to share that information as much as possible. So I think these are the cases where that really matters. Similarly, if you buy a blood pressure monitoring machine, do you want your health insurance company to know all about it, right? There's like a lot of cases where you want an identity to use for one thing that's separate from another, and it's nobody's business that those two things, should be connected together.
Yeah, and I think you kind of like hit the nail on the head with that last argument, at least in my opinion, because it's literally giving the option of surveillance to the business model that is most extractive, right? So I'm like, I can end up in a situation where I get denied healthcare, or maybe I get fired from my work because they kind of found out that I'm gonna have a blood pressure issue, and they're worried that it's going to affect my work. And it's all these things that you could solve beforehand with cash, that now that cash is getting phased out,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of like get stuck in this new version of the world that is amazing for people who are in power, amazing for vested interests, but is anything but that for the average person. And
Absolutely.
how do you get that average guy to understand these things? Because, like sometimes we have these discussions here and it feels like we're talking so high level, but it's such a down to earth problem that we're trying to solve.
Well, I think the big issue is where you get regulatory capture into this as well. So getting right back to the very heart of digital ownership, right? It's not just that companies can switch off physical things you might have bought, like your robot vacuum or whatever. But we've actually got the DCMA, which is worldwide now because of the intellectual property treaties, the WIPO treaties that most countries have signed, which makes it illegal for you to turn the thing back on, right? It actually makes it illegal for you to mess with some physical thing you bought, like a robot vacuum. If you have the smarts, or someone on, eBay or wherever can sell you a little chip that you can plug into things so it works when they turn the cloud service off, that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to break locks on your own stuff. So, when people kind of want to understand why this matters to them, right, it's getting to the point where, car companies could just decide, oh, this model is, we don't want to support it anymore. Turn them all off, right? And it's illegal in most countries to retrofit that, right, and to work around it.
John Deere does this with the tractors.
Right, exactly.
If you try to fix the tractor by yourself, it notices and it like shuts down everything, and it's crazy. It's something you bought, and they can just like turn it off remotely. And it's another thing that I heard about, like Samsung TVs taking snapshots of what you're watching and sending it back to Samsung so they can sell it. So again, we are dealing mostly with a business model. It's a business model that it can no longer grow the pie, because we kind of destroyed the credit market. Okay, now I'm going high level, but basically what I'm trying to say is that if you make money from a job, if you take a wage, your money is worth less and less, which means you can buy less and less, which means the things that you do buy, the people who create those things try to get as much money out of you as possible because they know you can't afford other things. This is the basic institution. You can buy the phone for $1,000, but then you're stuck, right? And they have you, and then they can like squeeze you a bit here, squeeze you a bit there. And it's all about how much they can squeeze before you collapse. Yeah. And I think that this business model kind of has to end somehow, because I think we're at this like end of this cycle. And I think stuff like NVIDIA, all these crazy valuation, SK Hynix and all that stuff, it kind of like brings to bear this idea that you can't really do that endlessly without having any sort of repercussion. And the way I bring it back into the open internet is that your margin is my opportunity. Whoever notices these things happening, well, our message to them is have a look at Saito Network, have a look at the Refactor, and see how you can make money out of this by being a normal person, dealing with normal people and providing value.
Well, this is the amazing thing. I mean, it's not radical, right? It's going back to the idea that there are two bakeries on the street, and maybe they both do fabulously well because some people like Abe's and some people like Susan's. But maybe eventually Susan takes over because Abe's product is substandard, right? But people can just choose which bakery they want to go to and get good, honest service. And those businesses are motivated to, branch out into cookies or whatever it is, if that's what what customers are starting to be interested in. It's not radical. This is a very well understood way of running stuff. It's actually pulling the tentacles that make that sort of thing impossible out of the system. Right. So making sure that if you buy an IoT device, and like people come to Saito and start putting your IoT devices on a Saito backbone where people can interact with their devices without a centralized data center, right? People can buy a device and they can know it'll continue to work for as long as they want to keep running it. That's a real market. And that's something that's very different, I think. And I think you're right. People are starting to see this and starting to feel like, God damn it, everything's a subscription now, right? Like I have to keep paying BMW to keep the heated seat function in my car that I bought, etc. And it's getting to the point where people are now looking at, well, can I have the washing machine without the cloud connectivity? Because they're just suspicious of like what that's going to mean for them.
I was watching a video the other day about this guy who bought a Mercedes E190 from the 80s and used it as an example for enshittification.
Right.
And showed
the internet tried to show me that same video. Yes.
And it just goes to show like how much better quality was back in the day and how they know how to make products that work. They're just choosing not to because, again, it's a question of, maybe we're going too far in the deep end, but as the value of money goes down, you kind of want to keep the prices at the same level. So you kind of have to cut things over and over again. And it gets to the point where you can't cut anymore. Then you have to find new business models. And that's how you get these subscriptions and so on, right? And I think that when we're going to look at these things like 5-10 years into the future, we're kind of going to see like, when did we jump the shark? Was it the subscription to have heated seats? Was it the camera that monitors your face when you drive? Was it Samsung, taking snapshots of what you're watching and sending them and selling that data? I think it's a combination of all of them. But again, this is your opportunity. Because the people who are doing these things, right, they know that this won't last forever, right? It's a kind of like a race to the bottom. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there are things that are being built. There are alternatives happening. And, while private networks use your data as a moat, the open internet gives the users a moat to protect themselves from all these sort of like predatory behaviors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it doesn't just do that in providing that protection. It also, and those opportunities, it creates a much more vibrant space, right? It's, are you shopping at the hyper mall or are you shopping at those kind of bakeries on the street, right? Where you get real variation and, people trying new things, people doing new things. And the big thing to remember is, in almost all of our interactions now, we're getting a sliver of the value out of them, right? All of our digital interactions. I mean, the classic one is just, it's not just that Google or whoever, squeezing every last inch of data out of you that they can, or ounce of data out of you that they can, and then vending it for the highest possible value. They are doing that. The thing is not just that they're doing that, it's that they're doing that almost exclusively for their own benefit. You get the very minimum that they can give you in that accounting, and you have no ability really realistically in modern systems to change that agreement, or even to prevent them from changing the agreement itself underneath you. So getting out of that system, the thing that I think most people won't realize is that you can make, forget the 30% tax on any kind of transactions on iPhones, which is just a really egregious and obvious version of rent seeking. It's, every interaction we're getting a mild fraction of the, the revenue and support, et cetera, that we could be out of these things. So, the YouTube have done, hi YouTube, I know we're on you, but they've done a great job of the classic American dream style one too, where there's a few mega wealthy, very profitable, creative, creators, influencers, whatever you want to call them out there with channels. which YouTube obviously likes there to be 50 really popular ones than thousands of less popular ones. And that also makes people feel, oh, look, like being an influencer is a real, career. It's something I could really pursue. But in that deal, those influencers are getting pennies on the dollar, if that. I mean, they're getting just enough to become very wealthy doing it, so that the influencer myth can build around this business model for YouTube, right? It's by no means a fair accounting. And in fact, on an open run platform where people were getting a genuine percentage of the ad revenue they were generating from their own content, they could do on a few thousand viewers what it takes millions of viewers to do on something like YouTube. And I think that's the real difference, is the ability to have, when to make it come home to people, the ability to do something like that and build a business around, 1,000 to 2,000 customers, like a lot of small businesses actually operate on. That's a real thing on an open internet. And the only reason it's not a real thing on the current internet is because of enclosure, and because people are trapped into these systems, and because of a lot of regulation around, things like compliance and stuff that makes it impossible for people to run their businesses. That's something that you can change. It's something you could be part of making that difference just by starting to use it.
Yeah, I think this idea of client and server, right, where the server dictates the terms of the deal, and it's a bit like that scene in Star Wars with Lando Calrissian getting screwed over by Darth Vader, and he's like, "I have altered the deal. Pray I don't alter it further."
Yeah,
and that's the way it feels when you deal with these companies. Like your only option is to accept the terms and conditions, right? You have no recourse. And what the open internet does, what something like Saito Network does, is to create like a constitutional layer that everybody has to adhere to, right? So in the face of the network, Microsoft and user XYZ556 have the same rights. They are treated equally. They have the same rights. They can behave according to the rules of the network, and they can coexist, and they cannot impinge on one another just because one has more resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could still do things like, say, on AlexTube, I'm only hosting videos about frogs, and you could
don't steal my idea.
Sorry about that. Anyway, and I could have only videos about pancakes. Whatever, you can still do what you want to do. You can run your accounts, your businesses, your things as you wish. No one's telling you have to cover content that you don't want to, etc. But the inverse is also true. If I send a message, it goes out across the network. I don't need to ask anyone's permission. Doesn't mean anyone needs to pay attention to me, but it also means I don't need to ask anyone's permission, including Microsoft or whatever. So I can send, like emails kind of used to be, but never had any economic way to keep forcing it forward, where, they would just be broadcast across the whole network and they'd get to wherever they were going. That's a real thing on Saito, right? So nobody can change your ability to do that. No one can lock you out. So when you make a deal with a company, it's them and you. Every single time it's them coming to you, you making a decision. There's no ability to lock you in. If they change what they're doing, you can walk away because they cannot stop you. And that's a very, very different experience. And I think, one of the things I see when people start using, sort of tools like the video call, or whatever, is afterwards, when you ask them about it, there may be comments about the UI. I wasn't expecting this, because they're used to using something else or whatever. But when you point out, wasn't it enjoyable? You didn't have to log in. You didn't have any issues. And they suddenly realize, if they remember their last call, like two people couldn't get onto the Zoom call because Zoom was trying to force them to download the app and wouldn't let them use the browser or whatever it was. The person who started the call did it from their personal account accidentally. So the whole call ended 45 minutes in because that was the limit of the call, and they had to switch over to the paid account, whatever it is. Just being free of all of that and having just a seamless thing where, yes, you're paying for a service if you're paying for it, but you're paying for what you get. And things like making a video call should be so close to free. They should be, watching one ad should pay for 1,000 video calls, because 99% of what is happening is between you and the people you're talking to, and no company is involved.
Exactly, and it's one of those situations where it's literally a few pennies cost you $10 in a monthly subscription, and you have to use some app. And whenever you want to invite someone to have a chat with you on your app, the link tracks that person and also tries to get that person to download the app as well. And
if they don't have to create an account themselves just to use it, et cetera, et cetera. We've gotten used to the idea that that's like, on a phone you can call someone with just their number, but we've gotten so used to, like, is so and so on Signal, or are they on Telegram, or are they on WhatsApp, or how do I contact you? And that you can't just talk to each other across applications. It's this sort of weird thing we've just gotten used to, which is funny because they fought. There was a long hard fight, funnily enough, by legislators to stop that nonsense between telcos back in the day.
Yeah, and I think coming back to this idea of like account creation fatigue. If you like to be free and do things your own way, you're going to love the open internet, because it's basically that. It's allowing you to do all these things that now have so many layers of friction at a fraction of the cost, if not free, without any sort of repercussions or having to remember passwords and stuff like that. And it's literally a better alternative. It's a better product. Sure, it's going to take some time to grow, but it is the better product. And anyone who enjoys having that sort of control over their own life, digital life, if you want to talk about digital rights, I think, if you want to write a book about it, I think Saito Network should be a chapter in itself, because it is literally digital rights. And it's rights that we used to have in the real world. For example, you have a phone subscription to a contract. They cannot change the contract. They have to get you on a new contract if they want to change it. But online, they just press a button, they change the deal, you have to accept, otherwise you're out. That's, we can't live with that anymore.
No, I think it was like I talked about, like, you cleverly using the language of shopping for shopping carts and bags and stuff to kind of convince people they're doing the same thing they were before. That was subtle. What was not subtle is corporate response to the laws. And I'm talking about this, what I mentioned before, things like DCMA, right? Like going hard at it. Corporates went hard at it to try and take as much of the ground as they could when it came to legislating not just the internet, but then digital goods and all of those sorts of things, right? So they were never going to stop people from being able to repair, I don't know, a hammer that they owned. But somehow, because we got digital stuff into things, and that's now most of our tools, most of our daily objects have a digital electronic aspect, they managed to sneak in, we get to tell you what you can do with your own thing. And that was a full court press. That was some hard work by corporates wanting to take ground away from consumers, and we pay for it every day in a bunch of ways around the products and services that we get. And so, to your point, I think the open internet alternatives are better on a bunch of things. They're better user experiences in the classic, is this web product good? Because they don't have dumb lockouts. They don't have, cutoffs because you haven't got the right account level, et cetera, et cetera. Those bad experiences you have where you can't raise customer service, or you need to log into your email to get the email to unlock your email. Those kind of dumb things just don't happen. At the same time, they're a better experience because just like CDs used to cost, $30 in Australia, and you can now download the music for a fraction of that. The same thing can happen again, because if you were just giving the artist directly what they got from your purchase, if you gave them 20 cents for downloading the song, they'd be absolutely over the moon. Right. And so it can be a better product in both ways. The user experience can be better, but the overall product experience also is by definition better, because there's less rent seeking and extraction happening between you and the product itself.
Yeah, I think in a more simple way, you could say that anything that you can think of that you want to do, you probably can do it, and you won't have to ask permission from anyone to do that thing, right? And you won't have to pay.
You won't have to ask permission, and you won't have to pay tax.
Yeah, basically, that's the TLDR. And I think
I could have just said that at the start, maybe.
I think that's like as good of a pitch as you're gonna get. And I think that this new wave of the internet is actually coming. I think that we're delivering on a promise that was made decades ago by other people. Right. And it's a very strange feeling, but it was, it's unavoidable. And I think that all these business models that are squeezing normal people, just like trying to nickel and dime them every single way possible, I think that's going to eventually it's already creating this like tidal wave. And, the people who are watching us, the people who are listening to this pod, if you're a coder, this should be music to your ears. If you're a marketer, this should be music to your ears. If you have a business, this should be music to your ears, because you will be able to, just like you did with AI for work, you could leverage AI to do more work in less time. Here, you can generate more wealth, you can build faster, and not have all that overhang that I can tell you, like, it's going to get way worse. You're going to be afraid to write something in Signal or WhatsApp because maybe the system will read it and you'll get problems at work, or maybe the system will read it and you won't be able to buy medicine for the same price, or the food that you're buying, they find out you ate too much meat. No, we can't have that, right? So I think it sounds very bleak, but it's also very positive. It's positive because you have a way out, you have an exit, and this, not only is the grass greener on the other side, but you get to, keep the cows that you graze on that pasture without being worried of, the man coming to get you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really exciting because I think there's also so much more space for vibrancy and cool stuff, right? The more providers who get better results from serving users better can only result in cooler shit for everyone, right? That to me is one of the big promises, is just get away from the shopping mall corpo internet to something that's actually vibrant and alive and has a space for you and has cool stuff that you didn't think was out there.
My slogan, my catchphrase for this episode would be cooperation instead of corporation. And I think that kind of like sums it up. What do you think, Richard?
I like that. I like the corporate. Yeah, I'm dyslexic, so sometimes I might have trouble disambiguating the two, but I think that works.
All right. Is there anything you want to add? A closing comment or?
No. It's been I think a really fun episode. There's a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's actually a really rich and interesting topic to go over. So thanks everyone for joining, and keep your eye on what we're doing at Saito. Come along and start using these tools and see how good they can be, and just how different the experience can be, how much better it can be.
Yes, I completely agree with your assessment. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll catch you next week. Don't forget to follow the Open Internet Pod on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, and share this video with friends, family, and even random people on the street. Just stop people on the street and, hey, have you guys seen this? It's a great pod. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.